Hello, my friends. Mandy here with a quick invitation for you to join the Patreon for our show. We've recently switched up some of the benefits, including a new monthly workbook to go along with all the incredible content you're getting on the show. It's a quote yourself through grief kind of a vibe, and for only $10 a month, it is a wholly worthy and affordable way to invest in your own healing process without the commitment of a full coaching relationship. Learn more at patreon.com/Mandy Capehart, and of course, the link is in the show notes. Thank you as always for being here. Now let's get into the good stuff. Welcome back to Restorative Grief with Mandy Capehart. You are listening to episode 109, titled In Pursuit of the Creative with Nik Goodner. My guest this week wants you to flourish. Nik Goodner is an online entrepreneur and content creator, helping other internet creatives to develop their unique voice, align with their values, and know their worth. His pursuit as a creative is inspired by the life of his father, who passed away at the age of 24 when Nik was only 5 years old. And when Nik reached age 24, something in his own grief experience shifted, widening his perspective and forever changing the way he moves through creativity, business, and life. Welcome back to Restorative Grief. I'm Mandy, and I'm here today with my new friend, content creator, Nik Goodner. Hi, Nik. How are you?
Hey, Mandy. I'm so glad to be here. Excited to do this podcast with you.
I know. I'm really excited. Our mutual friend Ross introduced us, and he has such a great radar for people that are just right up the alleyway of grief and creativity and all of the fun things that we love to talk about here on the show. And so why don't you just take a moment and introduce yourself
Yeah.
for the people who aren't familiar?
Ross is phenomenal. And he probably was like, who's caused me the most grief? And he
Yeah.
said, Nik. So I'm going to
Yeah.
send him your way.
I believe it.
So I'm in between jobs, kind of. I started a company a few years ago called Creative Church, and it's a job board for creatives within the church space. And I recently started handing that off to other people to kind of explore what it would look like to go full-time helping creatives as a content creator. And my main focus with that is I see such a disparity between what creatives want to earn, what I think that they're worth, their value, and how much they're making. So my focus has really been to figure out how to get creatives paid and how to help them not only communicate their value through marketing, but do it in a way where it's not, unfeathered growth all the time, where it's like, oh, I got to make $50,000 a month in order to be successful. No, like, what does sustainability look like? What does it look like to take care of yourself through the entrepreneurship journey? What does it look like to take care of yourself as a creative? And also, what does it look like to make those boundaries where you're getting paid what you're worth, what your creativity is worth?
Yeah, that's impressive because as a content creator, but also a small business owner, those are the questions I ask myself all the time, right? And especially love how you talked about how do you communicate your values and make sure that's what's coming across in marketing, because it's very easy in our social media world to fall prey to all of the trends and the real sounds and the funny little things and actually completely miss the mark of finding and supporting the people we launched the business for in the first
Yeah.
place. So good job. I love that that's where you've gone with your focus.
Thank you.
I suspect you didn't wake up one day as a little, 6-year-old and say, like, this is what I want to do when I grow up. I want to be a social media person, because social media wasn't even a thing when we were kids. So talk to me about what drove you away from your initial business or even into the world of deciding I want to be an entrepreneur and toward the area that you're in now.
So I think I've always known I didn't want to have like a traditional job. Even as like a kid, entrepreneurship just kind of came to me. My grandparents, they clean condos, and I went down and cleaned condos with them one summer, and that was like the transformative moment of realizing, hey, I don't have to work for anybody. I can work for myself, build my own client base. And that was like when I was 9 or 10 years old. So
Mm.
it was very early on, I realized that I wanted to kind of chase entrepreneurship. Um, And then I remember I got back in school that next year, that following year, and I sold little candy, little suckers, lollipops, and
Yeah.
was making a killing, doing very well. Um, and this again, sidetrack, but this sidebar, but the teachers got wind of this little business that I'd created, and I was probably making 50, $100 a week doing this as a
Whoa.
12-year-old kid.
Nice.
And I even had like little stamp cards. Like if you bought 10 of them, you get a free one. So I again,
Yeah.
very early on, I knew like this is what I want to chase. And teachers got wind of it, and they called us into like a big conference, and they were like, all of our class, like, hey, we're not going to let you sell things at school anymore. It's against the rules. And I had looked at the handbook because I'm a rule follower. I'm a stickler for the rules. And I looked at the handbook. There was nothing in it about selling things in school.
Yeah.
And they're like, we're not going to let you sell things at school anymore. And then they pointed me out specifically. They're like,
Stop.
Nick, this means you. And this is in front of like 200 of my fellow students. So I was like really embarrassed. Then the next week, they opened up their own candy business. And that was whenever I learned not to trust people. So
Oh God. Oh no.
I just always knew like that was going to be part of my journey. It came to head when my parents were like, "Hey, we want you to go to college, and like your college is paid for by my dad who had passed away." And I was like, "No, I'm not going to go. I want to chase this whole entrepreneurship thing."
Mm,
And I did, and that's whenever I started my first business was like content creation, blogging for different companies, and then I
mhm.
moved into Creative Church after I got fired from a church that I was working, or not fired from our church. The church closed, and I started Creative Church because I didn't want people to feel the way I felt whenever my community had just been taken away, just
Yeah.
completely eradicated overnight. Because I don't know if anybody's ever dealt with a church closure. You go from people who are your best friends in the whole wide world to no one wants to talk to you anymore because we just all went through this very embarrassing thing, right? And so you just lose that infrastructure of community very quickly. And people who have probably left the church know this too. It's like once you're outside of the church that you went to, that community no longer exists. And so Creative Church was kind of birthed out of that experience where it's like there has to be something for people to connect. um Outside, they're in the church context because they work for a church, but they're outside of it too, so that's kind of stabilized if they ever have to leave a job or whatever. And then that morphed into a job board and all that other good stuff, and that was 8 years of my life. And now I'm transitioning into what I'm doing now, so fun
Yeah.
stuff, fun times.
Serial entrepreneur from age 9. My daughters, ironically, also started a small business at school. Same thing, told you cannot sell things at school. You threw in a couple of really casual comments there about why we might have you as a guest here on the show. And so I'm going to try and peel those back a little bit gently. Let's
Please.
start with what you just said about the community loss and closure. There are
Mhm.
so many conversations we've talked about on the show about community loss, about church loss, faith changes, all of those things. What struck me about what you said um, was that no one in this community wants to really speak to one another because we're all suffering from or like recovering from going through this really embarrassing thing.
Mhm.
What about community loss read as embarrassing for you? What was that expression like? And
I think whenever I think about it, I look at it as like we were all small churches. I'm sure people know this. Small churches, there's this startup mindset that we're going to be the next insert mega church here.
sure.
And we're all making this vision happen that we're going to change the world, you know, no matter how big the church is, and no matter what the reality is. Like we just all have faith that it's going to work. And to have to say, we're going to close it down, we're going to shut it down.
Mm,
And it's not like we failed, right? Like we didn't live up to the potential that we all thought we had. I think that's the embarrassing part for everybody. And I don't know that I don't know if I felt the embarrassment, but I think it was just the other people on the team that felt. I'm projecting. Maybe I'm just
Mm.
projecting that onto them, but there was just this elephant in the room that none of us could get over, where it was like, we're not going to talk to each other. Like, it was just unspoken.
Mm.
This is over, and we're all moving on, and we're all going to do our own thing. And for my wife and I, whenever that happened, we had just moved to the town 8 months prior,
Mm.
so we didn't know anybody.
Yeah.
And so that's where it kind of amplified that situation, where it was like, oh, so
Mm.
everybody we knew, like, was in the church context. Like, we don't have
Yeah.
any friends. We don't have anybody that we actually really know. And luckily we weren't too far away from where we had lived when we went to college. And so we were able to go back and like meet up with our friends there. But being, that was once a weekend that we got to do that. Doing that day to day, where just no community. That's where that's where I started to figure out what it is that we could do to actually bring people together, bring creatives together.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a very strong narrative of connection and success coming through everything you're saying. And
Mhm.
you mentioned it earlier too when you were talking about the assembly at school and how they publicly shamed you for your brilliance and for your creativity and for your insight. And
I said that, and it's funny that I'm saying it here. I didn't realize that until about 2 weeks ago. I was retelling that story to my wife, and then I stopped and I was like, and then they just embarrassed me, and I was like, what was that about? And it was kind of funny because it's like this realization, that happened 20 years ago, and I'm just now having the realization, like, oh my god,
man,
they embarrassed me. That was embarrassing. Why would they do that? Like, they should
yeah.
have known better.
I
So
mean, but you catching it 2 year or 20 years later is beautiful because that's you recognizing you have something now that younger self
yeah,
needed. Now is the moment that you can say, okay, younger self, I see you.
right,
I
exactly.
recognize it. It's okay. Create some safety, which is beautiful because I'm thinking about this new creative business endeavor and
Yeah,
the direction you're going. And there's a lot of authority that you carry into this arena, especially into what is really a crowded demographic of content creators and people trying to say, no, dear content creator, I have the steps you need. No, I have the steps you need, and not positioning yourself as a guru, but really recognizing that you're pulling from creatives what their secret sauce is, so to speak, and helping them
yeah.
flesh that out in a way that is honoring to their values and honoring to what their goal is ultimately. So um, that obviously didn't come from necessarily the teachers and the way that they've taught you, or even maybe the leadership in your churches and the way that they've led and kept businesses going. So, what is it? It's obviously something innately in you, but where did that come from? Who's the person or the people that really helped inspire you to become this person?
That's a good question. Part of it, I think, came from that any like that sense to rebel, uh, to challenge the status quo. Um, and I think that you say it didn't come from the teachers, but in a way, it kind of did,
Sure, yeah.
because they gave me a little bit of a lesson in who I can trust, who I can't trust, right? Like, who actually has my best intention for safety. Does that
Mm-hmm.
make sense? And I think that's also like what the core development of where my Enneagram 8ness comes from, right? Where it's like, I'm the challenger, I'm the rebel, um, because I've seen so many times where I put faith in people that you were supposed to put faith into, and they didn't show up. And it's not that they fell short, it's that they, like the teachers, they embarrassed me. Like, they failed tremendously short. Like, it's not just like, oh, they just didn't live up to my expectations. It's like, no, well, you actually like did it out of malice in some instances. I'm thinking through my entire life now.
Mm-hmm.
Um and so I think in a lot of ways that's where it came from. Like, it's just that kind of having the rug pulled out from under you several times from people who you were, you know, the world told you, like, it's okay, you can trust this pastor, you can trust this, teacher, you can trust this authority figure because they got your best interest. And it's like, well, but they didn't.
Mm,
And so they kind of became my lessons for, what do I want this world to look like?
mm.
What can I do for people? And I think, saying going back and like taking care of your younger self, I think about that a lot. How can I take care of who can I be that I needed when I was younger is where I kind of come into a lot with that.
Yeah, I think that's a really powerful stance, especially as a fellow Enneagram 8. That that tendency to guard that
Hmm.
younger self instead of allowing that younger self to really be honest
Yeah.
and be vulnerable and say what needs to be said, but also express without trying to fix and repair what needs to be expressed is really important. And so that's I wanna go back to, the other little piece that you threw in there, and talking about losing your dad when you were really little, because I know you mentioned to me off air a little bit about the
Mhm.
way that his life inspired you to pursue this path as well, so I'd just love to hear a little bit of that.
Yes. So I always tell people that probably one of my greater inspirations is my father's death. Um, and I think it's because it happened. I have one of those funny memories where you can remember everything like in your childhood.
Mm,
So like the earliest memories I have are like just turning 1 years old, which
wow.
I found out recently is not very common.
Yeah.
Um, most people like have like a wake up sense where it's like 4 or 5 years old where they start to actually remember stuff. But
Mhm.
I have like vivid memories of my dad being around and such, and I think it's because of that early childhood trauma. We don't have to get into that. That's for another podcast. But he kind of became my biggest inspiration because he died when he was 24. It happened very quickly. He had esophagus cancer that uh, the doctors ignored. They didn't actually go in and actually find out what was wrong with him. They just kind of burst it off like, "Oh, you have heartburn," and that's not a big deal. Meanwhile, the guy's coughing up blood and can't eat, and so it happens like almost instantaneous. He goes into the hospital in January and he never comes back out, and he dies February 23rd. And so I was there in the room whenever it happened. Like I can remember saying goodbye and just having that moment of loss. And from that point on, there was the expectation to be like the man of the house, um, grow up so quickly. Because I had two other sisters, and so I kind of took on this responsibility to maybe be more adult than I should have as a kid. And in doing that, I realized very early on that I'm kind of living out a little bit of my father's legacy. Like he didn't get to accomplish a lot in life. As I've gotten older, I've realized 24 years old is very young. I didn't really grieve my father's death until about 5 years ago.
Mm.
Whenever I turned, well, it's been 6 years ago now. Whenever I turned 24, and I realized that like I'm now the same age that I was when my dad
Yep.
passed away,
Yeah.
and that realization hit me like a ton of bricks. And that was the first time, like I didn't cry when my father passed away when I was a kid. I grew up and my mom remarried very quickly, and the man who is my dad now, I mean, I've always called him dad. Like he stepped in, and that was a beautiful transition. Um so there wasn't a processing for that at all. And so 6 years ago I realized, hey, I am now 24 years old. My dad died when I was 24. Like, holy sh-
Yeah.
holy shit. Like I have to start processing this, and it just hit me. And so for the past 6 years I've
Mm.
processed that. So like whenever I trail off and I'm like I don't know what to say, it's because in a way I'm still experiencing it. Does that make sense?
100%. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Like
So
I go back to 5 years old, and it's like I don't know how to say these words because I don't know what to say about it.
I didn't want to interrupt when you were saying, "I'm not
Hmm.
sure what to say." It is because that was a moment. Those
Yeah.
are opportunities for our nervous system and our memories to really come back together because they're trying to integrate. It is
Yeah.
so common when we reach the age of for parent loss. So I lost my mom almost 9 years ago now,
I'm sorry.
and she was thanks. She was in her 50s, so I've got quite some time to go before I hit that age, but it is so common for people when they do hit the
Hmm.
age of the parents that they lost, that there is a reckoning. There
Yeah.
is a release of things we had no idea we were carrying, things we had no acknowledgement of that we were hiding from. And what comes to the surface is often indescribable because we've never been given the words or the power to describe it. And so for
Hmm.
you to express, like, well, I think I went back to being 5 again, it was exactly it.
Yeah.
Especially if your family was dealing with 3 little kids and a widow, right? Mom is
Hmm.
trying to create as much normalcy and stability in a completely unstable and abnormal situation.
Yeah.
And it was not maybe inappropriate that you were the man of the house. It was entirely inappropriate, but it's also
Hmm.
out of her control, right? That's not something she can parent out of someone who has that level of strength within them and that level of like fortitude and insight, even at that young age, to say, oh, I now have to step up or I want to make sure
Yeah.
everyone is okay, right? So, all of that to say, it makes perfect sense that you're finding yourself now still, and I don't even love the word still, because of course you're grieving, of course
Yeah.
that's carrying on, um, but being able to make space for yourself to pause and really reflect on what those moments can look like for you, as opposed to feeling really trapped by them
Yeah.
or really avoidant of them, I think is an incredibly difficult thing. So the ability to really feel connected to your dad through your business sounds monumental.
I don't know if I'd put it that I feel connected to him through the business as much as I feel like I'm carrying on what might have been. There's so much potential at 24, and there's not a lot of solidifying what that's going to be yet. Especially because he had just graduated college, and I think a year or two before he passed away.
Mm.
So, and he was raising 3 kids, and that's a lot of pressure. Um, so maybe in a way, I feel connected because I don't know. I'm getting to kind of live out a life that he could have had, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, I can see that.
Because I'll say this: I see the tendencies in the personality that kind of align with what I remember, what people talk about.
Mm,
But then, like, there's other parts of me that, like, I know he was not a sharp like business mind. Like, I know that, like, I kind of sense that from him, and so like those tendencies, those come from somewhere else.
well, sure.
But the connection point really happens whenever I think about you know my mark on the world and the mark that he didn't get to leave, and so I'm kind of continuing his story, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think it's a really common response to losing a parent as well, is
Hmm.
feeling um, a type of draw to continue, like you said, honoring the legacy and creating connections back
Yeah.
to that person and that memory. I think it's a really healthy way, as long as it's done with intention, you know what I mean, to
Yeah.
integrate that person and to integrate into the work that you do now and the person you become. Because so many of us like fatally just become or give our lives over to something so fully that we lose sight of ourselves. And I think you have a really settled sense of self in
Yes,
it.
that's what I'll say is that's where it's kind of like when you say connection, I'm thinking like I don't want to portray that I'm like trying to live his life
Totally.
because he had a completely different life with a completely different ambitions. That's what I'm trying
Right.
to get to. And so like the way I'm continuing it out is really honoring who he was and bringing those tendencies as kind of a reminder that, life is short.
Mhm.
Um Live your dreams, right? Like chase after what you want in this life, but not in a way where I'm trying to like replicate what he was doing because
Yeah.
I don't think that he and I, if he would have been alive today, I don't think he and I would have saw eye to eye with what I do. Because he was very much he liked school, he liked education, and he liked, going to college, and he wanted to be an educator more than anything. And like I have just a distaste for that. And I'm like, I am an educator in some ways, but like I don't have a taste for the traditional college and traditional like education experience. So I don't think that he and I would have saw eye to eye in that regard
Yeah.
if he would have been around. But so I don't feel that connection is what I'm saying. Like I
Yeah.
don't feel like I'm like living through his life. I feel like I'm
Right.
just kind of continuing on, like remembering him as I live my own life.
Yeah. Intentionally bringing awareness to your story and your state and your process, but not allowing it to really set the tone, the full narrative of everything that you build, because it can be really activating. I think there are a lot of, well, I know a lot of people who started businesses in honor of their loved ones, or who have um, even decided that without losing this loved one, I never would have become this person that I am, or done this
Hmm.
thing that I'm doing. And while you can point to pieces of that that may be true, it really dishonors the person that you are and the
Yeah.
process that you're in. Not to mention, makes it sound very much like that person had to die for you to fulfill your own life, which that's a
Yeah.
whole nother, speaking of a whole nother episode about trauma, that's one. Um, yeah. So how now is it with your mom and your stepdad, and the way you've created this life and this beautiful business structure, um, but not gone to college necessarily and not followed this traditional path? And
I turned out to be very successful in what I do, and
mhm,
so kind of in a lot of ways, I was right.
mhm.
So, and I'm not saying that college is evil and people shouldn't do it. If you want to go to college, go with God. But it just wasn't right for me,
Yeah.
and so I in a sense I kind of won that one. But we've always had. I would say that with my family, we've had a healthy relationship. Um, like I said, my stepdad, he stepped in and raised three kids, and he was always dad, and that was the thing that really meant a lot. And so, in a lot of ways, the relationship has always been pretty healthy. I've been able to talk about some of this stuff with them, and also it does help a little bit because my mom lost her dad whenever she was 17 years old, and
Wow.
so she kind of understands the experience a little bit. Um, and that relationship has always been pretty healthy in that regard, and being able to speak openly about it, and being able to you know I think there in the beginning, after the initial loss, it was a little bit more difficult, but here, now that I've whenever I started going through my grieving process, I found it was quite easy to talk to them about it.
Yeah.
And there was times growing up I didn't know whether I could or not, and
Mm,
so I just opted on the side of I'm not going to.
mm,
And I think that was more me personally being nervous about like how they would react, because like somebody steps up like my stepdad did and takes care of you your entire life and has essentially raised you since you were 5 years old. Like there's always in the back of my mind, like, am I going to be disrespectful talking about
mm.
missing my father, my biological father? And I think that probably also delayed the grieving process for me a lot, because I just didn't tap into those feelings at all. I never was brave enough to ask. And I think I actually probably had opportunities to. I just would mask them behind my witty humor, um, and kind of hide behind it. But once that floodgate broke, and I was like, "Oh, shit, I miss him," you know. And that happened when I was 24. I'd already moved out of the house. I'd been long, hadn't lived with them for a long time. Um, Being able to go and talk to them, that was part of the healing process, because I didn't realize that I was allowed to until then. So I would say overall the relationship was healthy.
Yeah.
I'm very lucky in that regard, um,
Yeah.
because I know how. I know friends who have lost parents also at a younger age, and there kind of becomes a, we don't go there. Like we just kind of ignore it.
Right.
And I don't feel like that was the case with my parents,
Yeah.
but I do feel like if anything, I was the one who was ignoring it because I didn't know how to act. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. You weren't equipped. You were a child.
Right.
And to have a mom who also experienced losing a parent at a young age gave her, there's so much wisdom she embodied, whether she knew it or not, whether you saw it
Hmm.
or not, that probably created that atmosphere so that when you
Yeah.
were older, you could actually start to process. So I'm
Yeah.
curious, what have the last 6 years looked like for you when it comes to doing grief work or processing? What does that mean to you?
A lot of crying.
Good.
uh oh man. I want to tell a story. If this comes off too weird for everybody, you can delete this out of the podcast.
Okay.
Um it was 6 years ago. I had a dream in which I talked to my father.
Mm,
And like it was him as an older person. Like it felt real. Like it was one of those things where it's like, did that happen? Like did I speak to someone beyond
yeah.
the grave? It was so it felt so real. And it was like I was out for like 16 hours, like dead asleep for 16 hours. And we sat in this room and we just talked. We talked about everything. And I told him, what I was doing. And that dream, whether it's just subconscious memory, going to work or, something happening on some sort of spiritual realm that I don't not aware of, like that triggered for me just the floodgate of like,
Mm,
oh my God, like I really actually miss him and I have never processed this.
mm,
Um and like in that dream, he was like, I just wanted you to know that I'm very proud of you and what you've done.
yeah.
And he told me to tell my sisters too. And the reason why I love this story uh is because I got to tell both of my sisters this dream and to see their faces
Mm,
because they didn't know him. Like they were too young. They don't have the special memory. They don't have the superpowers that I have. And so like having that like full on like real tangible experience for me, I was
yeah.
able to communicate that to them, and I got to do it at really special times in life. Like whenever my younger sister was getting married, I pulled her aside and I got to tell her, and I made her cry on her wedding day, so that was good for me. Um, Pat myself on the back. Probably not the best time, but I just that was what really triggered everything coming to I need to process what happened and and process this grief that I've experienced. And so again, if that's too weird, we can cut that out.
Not at all. No, it's beautiful because what you find when you start talking to grievers that are willing to be honest
Mhm.
is a recognition of that whole person. Part of us has denied that we have these holistic parts that need to be integrated, right? So everything I approach for grief is from a mind, heart, body, and spirit approach, right? I'm treating
Mhm.
with working with grievers in all of those arenas. And so often the spirit of the person, whatever that means to them, has been 100% shut down because
Yeah.
it's terrifying, because there's no real answers, and because grief is uncertainty. If you could shorten the definition of grief, you could just say uncertainty, right?
Yeah.
And so that type of an experience feels so concrete because your brain doesn't know the difference between imagined fear and real bear standing in front of you, right?
Right.
Same is true with that type of a dream or even an imaginative moment or a visualization. Our body can experience real connection and real healing in the moment through
Yeah.
that kind of an experience. And to say that Sounds like you're saying very woo woo, very like, hey, that's a little bit out there for me.
Mhm.
But the reality is that's how our relationships continue. We don't just
Yeah.
stop having a relationship to someone who has died. We actually can continue it in a way that brings health and connection back into that integrative state that we're looking for. So, uh, no, I think you'll be surprised to maybe even hear from people who are like, oh my gosh, after this airs, I had that experience. I had something similar because that's a beautiful, whether your psyche made it up or not, right?
Yeah.
It's a beautiful way for your brain to experience, okay, this feels like a permission slip. This feels like an
Mhm.
invitation into something new, into a
Yeah.
new way of approaching yourself and your story.
Yeah. It did. It was one of the I would say it's probably the pivotal moment
Yeah.
of recognizing everything. Just recognizing that there was grief there, that
Yeah.
I'd carried it for a long time, and that I had not even attempted to process it.
Yeah.
I didn't, well, maybe not attempted to process it. I just didn't know how to process it. Like you
Yeah.
said earlier, equipped to process it. I just wasn't equipped to process it.
Yeah. Well, Nick, what do you think you could boil down your heart for people in their grief work and even around the people who are doing like work creatively with their grief? So, marrying your two parts of your story here, right? That you are a
Hmm.
content creator and you're helping people really achieve their dreams as business owners, knowing full well that every one of us is carrying a big piece of grief with us, no matter where we
Yeah.
go. Um, what what would you tell someone who's really struggling to narrow their message, clarify their values? What would you invite them into if they're feeling like, "Ah, I'd love to do that, but this is in my way. My grief story is in my way. My fear is in my way."
Yeah. I think I would say let every feeling inform everything you do. And
Mm,
that's something that because I grew up in church, and growing up in church, there's always this idea that we kind of silence feeling, like we
mhm,
silence emotion because that's contrary to faith. And we don't want to really have emotion because if we do have emotion, then we're not in faith. So if we have sadness, then we're not in faith that, we're happy. Or if we feel depressed, like we're not in faith that, you know, we have a great life, whatever,
right.
whatever that is. We have this sense of like compress those feelings. And I think what I've learned is those feelings that we have, they almost inform the wholeness of ourselves, if that makes sense.
Mhm,
Um, and it's not that I'm shutting out this grief, it's that I'm going to accept that it's part of me and that
mm,
there's something here that will inform other parts of me. And I found that through writing a lot. I was already a writer. Of course, I'm a content creator, but daily writing of just spilling everything out onto pages, that that became the way that my emotion informed everything that I do. And it also became a way like to evaluate my emotion. Like, why do I feel this way? And I don't think a lot of us, not listeners of this podcast, they already know this, but people who don't listen to the podcast, they don't always think, why am I feeling this way? Or they'll just tap into like the surface of like, this guy made me angry, right? Like that guy made me angry. And that's as far as they'll go, but they'll never ask like, why would I even get angry about that to begin with? And spilling that onto the page is
mm,
where I started to come into terms with like, that guy made me angry because my teachers embarrassed me in front of all my friends one time. Like that's kind of the connections that happen. You begin to really process the emotion and the things that you feel in a way that's not just that surface level. Like we just think it's cause and effect. A lot of, well, again, not listeners to this podcast, they know better, but other people, they think it's cause and effect with emotion. Like, oh, this thing happened, therefore I reacted this way. And that's the only thing that I have to think about whenever I'm thinking about this emotion that I had. When in reality, a lot of times the way that we're reacting to something goes a lot deeper. And I can't answer why that is. Only you can do that. And it comes through a process of being willing to say, hey, why did I feel that way? What about that would piss me off? What about that would, make me upset? What about that would make me cry, right? We just assume that it's a sad story that's making you cry, but in a lot of ways, many times it's deeper than that. So that's how I'd say to approach it. Just let that inform you. Let those emotions inform you into the deeper part of yourself.
I love that. And ironically, the episode that comes out next week after this conversation has a big piece of recognizing our emotion and identifying like something in me is feeling some kind of way. What
Yeah.
do I want to do with it? So that'll be perfect. So people can keep listening and then
Beautiful
catch up
segue.
to this. Incredible
Beautiful
segue.
segue.
Unbelievable.
I didn't even know that
Ordained moment.
beforehand. Yeah.
Couldn't have planned it better. So Nik, you are a creative coach. You have a weekly newsletter. Tell me about it so people can go sign up.
So, like I said at the beginning of the podcast, really seeing a disparity between like what creatives think they should make and what they're actually making. And I see this. The reason the way I've come about this is not just like, anecdotally. It's because I've surveyed thousands of creatives, and through surveying those creatives for the past 4 years, I've found this is like the big thing that they feel like is they're dealing with is we think we should be paid a lot of money, but we're not getting paid a lot of money. We see our friends, they're making money. Why aren't we making money? And so I've taken it upon myself. I've burdened myself to be this voice of begging you to really rethink how you do creativity and how you ask people for money and get paid what you're worth. And so I a lot of my content's around that, and one of my big content pieces is my weekly newsletter, in which I tackle different topics around creative business, mindset, and mindfulness, because that's the thing that I notice a lot of business coaches miss. We want to talk about the money, but we don't want to talk about how to stay healthy and in a healthy mindset. And so things like journaling, tapping into the emotion, what I mentioned just a few minutes ago, like we talk about that on that newsletter. So if you're interested, it's just go to nikgoodner.com. That's nikgodner.com. And it's the only thing on my website. So
you can't miss it unless you spell it wrong, but we'll put it in the show notes. So there's no excuses. Perfect.
Right.
I love that you're like, I have burdened myself. That's the Enneagram 8 way, my friend.
Burden myself.
What we do. We take on the burden so that others can have a lighter load. So you're welcome, everybody. Nik, thank you. Thank you so much for making time to come be on this show. I realize a grief story and grief podcast is like outside of the norm for you, but I am endlessly grateful that you decided to like, okay, open up and try something new. So thank you for being here.
Of course. And thank you so much for having me. It has been an incredible experience, and I enjoyed getting to do this. It's not in the norm, but I really like doing it. So thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for listening to episode 109 of Restorative Grief. I love how Nik brought the fullness of his own creativity down into a very simple invitation that anyone can accept. When we learn to notice and name our feelings and emotional experiences, we can allow them to inform our creativity instead of derailing it. If you are a creative person experiencing that type of derailing in your own process, or even a business owner who isn't just quite nailing the authenticity piece in marketing, be sure to sign up for Nik's newsletter for guidance and inspiration on how you too can flourish in your creative expressions. And if this is your first time listening to the podcast, I am so grateful you made the time to tune in. Be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And if you appreciated this story, share it on social media, tag us, or send it to a creative friend, or just listen again and take some notes for yourself. For a link to Nik's website, as well as my own, and information about coaching with restorative grief, be sure to check out the show notes. And before we go, as always, please remember, the only solution to grief is to do the work of grieving. Thank you for listening. I'll see you next week.